The first thing I heard that morning wasn't the rooster. It was diesel, deep, grinding, and too close. By the time I stepped onto my porch, 3 HOA trucks were idling at my gate. A yellow bulldozer sat behind them like a loaded weapon. Carol Dempsey, the HOA president, stood in front with a clipboard and a pair of mirrored sunglasses that couldn't hide her smirk. "Morning, Mr. Harlan," she called. "You're in violation of Community Ordinance 14B, unauthorized structures on shared land. We're here to remove them." I stared at the line of men in reflective vests, none of them licensed contractors, all of them looking uneasy. My barn sat 30 yards back, quiet and solid. That barn had been here since 1952, long before the HOA, before the subdivision even had a name. I asked her calmly, "You got a court order for that?" She blinked. "The board voted unanimously." "That's not a court order," I said, and took a sip of my coffee. The thing about people like Carol, they mistake volume for authority. She puffed up, started reading legal jargon off her clipboard, half of it meaningless. I caught phrases like easement infringement and common access. Then she waved toward the bulldozer. "Move it in," she snapped. That's when I hit record on my body cam. They made it 20 feet before Deputy Collins rolled up the gravel road. I'd called him the minute I heard the diesel start. He knew the property lines better than anyone. He hunted deer with my late brother back in the day. "Morning, folks," he said, stepping out of his cruiser. "Got a permit for this demolition?" Carol stiffened. "This is internal HOA business." "Not on private property, it's not," he said. "You're trespassing." Her smirk cracked just a little. "This land is part of the common boundary." "According to who?" She lifted the clipboard again, but he cut her off. "I'll need to see county plats, not HOA paperwork." Her silence was worth framing. They backed off that morning, but only just. As the trucks rattled away, Carol leaned out her window and called, "You're just delaying the inevitable, Mr. Harlan. That structure's illegal." I didn't bother responding. The camera got every word. By noon, I'd printed the footage, time-stamped it, and sent a copy to my lawyer, my cousin's old campaign counsel, a man who knew the smell of legal overreach better than anyone. He laughed when he saw the video. "Classic HOA bluff," he said. "Let's make it sting." The harassment started small. First came the letters, 4 of them in 1 week, each citing a different ordinance: too tall grass, unregistered tractor, non-conforming fencing. I kept every envelope sealed in a plastic folder, photographed front and back. Then came the visits. Unannounced inspections, where Carol's people would walk my fence line with cameras muttering about boundaries and common ground. Once they even tried to measure with a rolling wheel, on my property. I met them at the gate, always calm, always recording. "You're free to leave," I'd say, "or stay and explain this to the sheriff again." They'd leave, but I knew something bigger was coming. The real trouble started when I found the stake. A new wooden survey stake, fresh orange paint, no initials, driven 3 feet inside my north fence. I pulled it out, checked the coordinates on my GPS tracker, and compared it to the county plat. Sure enough, they'd moved the boundary line, at least on paper. That's when I realized Carol wasn't just bluffing. She was staging a land grab. I spent that night under the porch light, poring over every deed and survey I had. The original plat from 1952, my grandfather's hand-signed deed, the HOA's incorporation map from 2003. It didn't take long to see what they'd done. They'd redrawn the association's jurisdiction to include my entire front pasture, without filing a single county amendment. So I got to work. Step 1. Establish evidence. I mounted a new trail cam on the north fence and synced it to my phone. Every car that passed, every person who touched that stake, recorded and time-stamped. Step 2. Get expert allies. I called up a licensed surveyor I'd worked with before, a quiet man named Derek who carried a laser level like a badge. He came out 2 days later, scanned the land and shook his head. They shifted the marker line by 12 feet, he said. No county authorization, no registered coordinates. Whoever did this knows just enough to be dangerous. I asked him to file an official survey report. He did, signed, notarized, and uploaded to the county record. Meanwhile, the HOA sent me one final letter, certified mail this time. Final notice. Property seizure will proceed under Section 7A of the Covenant due to ongoing non-compliance. I almost laughed. Section 7A didn't exist, but I played along. I replied with a short email. Thank you for your notice. All correspondence will be forwarded to state regulators for review. And then I made one more call, this time to my cousin's office at the state capitol. He picked up himself. Hey, what's going on down there? Small-town tyranny, I said. You'll want to see the footage. By the end of the week, my cousin's legal team had copies of every letter, every clip, every timestamp. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted them caught in the act. So I set a trap. Using the doorbell cam feed, I configured a motion alert on the north gate, where they'd been sneaking in. I also placed a decoy stake back in the soil, just like before. The real one, the one with the GPS pin, was hidden 10 feet deeper inside. 2 nights later, just past midnight, I got the alert. Flashlights, 2 figures. One of them was Carol. The other was her vice president, clipboard in hand. They pulled up the decoy stake, whispered something, then planted a new one farther in. The camera got everything. Faces, voices, coordinates, even the license plate of their truck. That footage would later become Exhibit A. The next morning, I called Deputy Collins again. Got a trespass and tampering case for you, I said. He came out, watched the footage, and whistled. They're digging their own hole, aren't they? Deeper every night, I said. He filed the report, and by the afternoon the county attorney had it in hand. Carol didn't know it yet, but her HOA's authority had just crossed from nuisance into felony territory, property damage, falsified boundary claims, and impersonation of a public officer. Still, I kept quiet. Because the best part was still coming. I printed the survey maps, the GPS data, the video stills, and every HOA letter I'd received. Then I slid them into a binder labeled Evidence Phase 1. Phase 2 would come soon. It would involve a courtroom, a few reporters, and one governor who didn't take kindly to bullies. But for now, I leaned on my porch rail, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise cut across the pasture they'd tried to steal. Sometimes the best revenge is patience, especially when the law is already on your side. They say sunlight's the best disinfectant. Turns out so is a timestamp. By the next HOA board meeting, the neighborhood's gossip mill was already grinding. Folks had seen the sheriff's cruiser parked by my north fence. They'd seen the new survey stakes and the cameras I'd mounted. Carol tried to spin it as routine boundary clarification. But when she called the emergency board meeting that Thursday, I decided to show up, quietly and prepared. The HOA clubhouse sat at the end of Maple Ridge Drive, all beige siding and inflated importance. They'd set out donuts and clipboards, the usual theatre. I walked in carrying a black binder, camera running from my chest pocket. Carol looked up from the table, smile tight as dental floss. Mr. Harlan, this is a private meeting for homeowners only. Perfect, I said, taking a seat. I own my home. That shut her up for about 5 seconds. The agenda started with petty noise complaints and mailbox colors. Then Carol cleared her throat and slid into the real reason everyone was there. Next order of business, Parcel 47B, also known as the North Pasture. All eyes turned to me. She clicked a remote and a projector screen lit up with a digital map, the one they'd doctored. Sure enough, it showed my land shaded in HOA green. After consulting our property records, she said, we've determined the structure on this parcel encroaches on community easement. The board has voted to reclaim it. I waited until she finished her little speech. Then I opened my binder and spread out 6 color photos. "Before you vote on anything else," I said, "you might want to look at Exhibit A through F. Derek's certified survey, the GPS overlay, the time-stamped photo of Carol's flashlight at 12:43 a.m., the video still of her VP planting a new stake, the county sheriff's report number at the top." The room went dead quiet. One board member, an older man with bifocals, cleared his throat. "Carol, what is this?" She stammered. This is taken out of context." "Context?" I said. "Because the timestamp says you were redrawing property lines at midnight." A low murmur rippled through the room. I could feel the shift, the moment when fear replaced arrogance. That's when I dropped the final piece. "I've already turned everything over to the county attorney," I said, "and the State Land Commission." Her pen froze mid-air. "You... what?" "They'll be reviewing your falsified maps and your so-called Section 7A ordinance." I smiled slightly. "Might want to double-check that one. It doesn't exist." The meeting ended faster than a summer storm. Carol stormed out first, muttering about lawyers and defamation. The rest of the board followed in silence, avoiding my eyes. By the time I stepped outside, the air felt lighter. But I knew better. HOAs don't quit. They regroup. Sure enough, the next week I got an email from a law firm. A real one this time. Subject: Notice of intent to enforce easement violation. From Dempsey Clark Rowe, LLP. It was 10 pages of polished intimidation. Half citations, half bluff. They demanded voluntary removal of the barn structure, or face civil penalties. I read it twice, smiled, and forwarded it to my cousin's chief counsel with a note. They hired real lawyers now. Time to turn on the lights. He replied within the hour. "We're drafting something special. Don't move a nail." By the end of the week, the counter-strike began. My cousin's office issued a state regulatory inquiry, an official review of the HOA's charter, finances, and land filings. When a governor's legal division stamps something active investigation, it tends to change people's tone. Meanwhile, Derek the surveyor filed an affidavit confirming the falsified boundary claims. Deputy Collins supplemented it with his trespass report. Everything was lining up like dominoes. I wasn't angry anymore. I was patient. I knew what was coming. Still, Carol tried to fight dirty one more time. Late one night, my trail cam pinged again. 2 men in hoodies walking the same north fence. This time they weren't measuring, they were cutting. The footage showed wire snips, a flashlight beam, and one of them muttering, "She said it's legal. Just snip it." They clipped my fence in 3 spots before my floodlight kicked on. They bolted, but not before the camera caught their faces clear as day. I turned the footage over to Collins again. By morning, both men were cited for trespassing and property damage. When asked who hired them, they gave the same answer. Carol, from the HOA. It was almost poetic. At this point, the story had gone public. A local journalist from the County Herald called me after seeing the sheriff's report posted online. "Mind if we do a story?" she asked. "Sure," I said. "Just stick to the facts. They're good enough." The article hit the front page. HOA accused of illegal land grab. State launches investigation. Within 2 days, Carol's board email went dark. Their Facebook page vanished, and I got another message. This one from Carol herself. Handwritten, no letterhead. "Mr. Harlan, perhaps we can resolve this privately." I didn't even reply. Instead, I spent my weekend preparing for the official hearing at the county courthouse. The HOA had requested a formal review, hoping to reclaim face. My cousin's office arranged to send an observer, a state interest representative as deity, as they called it. I didn't know until the morning of the hearing that my cousin himself would show up. He walked into that courthouse in his rolled-up sleeves and state pin, nodded at the clerk, and sat right beside me. The look on Carol's face when she saw him, worth every sleepless night. "Morning, Carol," he said, smooth as calm water. "I hear you've been making quite a mess of my cousin's property." She went pale. The hearing lasted 3 hours. Carol's lawyer tried to argue community easement precedent. The judge cut him off halfway. "Do you have any filed county maps supporting that claim?" "No, Your Honor." "Then you have no case." We entered the GPS data, the time-stamped video and the sworn affidavits. It was surgical, each piece of evidence slicing through the HOA's lies until there was nothing left to stand on. When the judge banged his gavel, his ruling was short and final. "The HOA's claim is invalid. All actions regarding Parcel 47B are hereby vacated. Plaintiff's property rights are affirmed." Then came the kicker. "Further, the matter of falsified filings will be referred to the State Attorney's Office for review." Carol's jaw dropped. Her lawyer whispered something, but she just sat there, staring at the floor. Outside, the reporters swarmed. I didn't say much, just one line. "Sometimes you don't need to fight fire with fire. You fight it with paperwork." My cousin laughed. "You always did like a quiet victory." "Quieter the better," I said. We watched as Carol's car pulled away, flanked by reporters. The same bulldozer she'd brought weeks ago sat idle on her association's maintenance lot, rusting in the autumn sun. Back home, I walked the fence line one more time. The fresh posts gleamed under the morning light. The pasture was still mine, every inch of it, legally and permanently. I installed one last camera facing the open road, not because I needed to, but because I could. And as I watched the wind move through the grass, I thought about how many homeowners never fight back. How many just give up when someone with a clipboard says, "You can't. Not this time. Not this farm." But the story wasn't finished yet, because a few weeks later the HOA tried one last desperate move, something that would make national headlines. And that's when the governor himself decided to pay them a visit. 2 weeks after the court ruling, I thought it was over. Turns out the HOA still hadn't learned their lesson. It started with another letter, this one printed on fancy new stationery with a different logo. Maple Ridge Property Association, Inc., reorganized. Same board, new name, and apparently a short memory. They were hosting a community rebuilding meeting at the clubhouse, open to all residents. Translation: damage control. I didn't plan to go, but when the county reporter called and said she'd be there to cover it, I figured it might be worth one more cup of coffee and a front row seat. The clubhouse smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. Carol sat at the head of the long oak table again, posture stiff but rehearsed, flanked by 2 new board members, both smiling like they'd been promised immunity. The projector was back on. This time, instead of property maps, it showed a PowerPoint titled "Restoring Trust and Order in Maple Ridge." I took a chair near the back. The room was full, half the neighborhood, half of them just there for spectacle. Carol cleared her throat and began her speech. "Recent misunderstandings," she said, "have created division within our community. But we're moving forward with new leadership, improved governance, and—" Someone coughed, loudly. She shot a glare, then kept going. "And we're reaffirming our community's right to regulate land usage in accordance with—" I raised my hand. She tried to ignore me, but the room was watching now. "Regulate what land?" I asked. "Mr. Harlan," she said, forcing a smile, "this is not the time." "It is if you're talking about my pasture again." The crowd shifted. Someone whispered, "That's the guy with the video." Carol's tone sharpened. "This meeting is to rebuild community spirit, not rehash old grievances." "Then why," I said, holding up my phone, "did your new filing last week list my parcel under HOA jurisdiction again?" The room went silent. I tapped the screen. The county's online database filled the projector behind her. Real-time data, public record. There it was, the new Maple Ridge Property Association boundary map. and sure enough, they'd tried to slide my acreage back in. This time, under a different parcel code. Her face went white. "That," she stammered. "That must be an administrative error." "Then you won't mind if we ask the state investigator sitting in the back row," I said, "to verify that." Every head turned. A man in a navy suit stood up from the back corner, calm, hands clasped. I didn't have to introduce him. Everyone in the room recognized him from last month's newspaper headline. The governor. My cousin. The air shifted. You could feel the shock ripple through the crowd like a current. He stepped forward slowly, his voice even and polite. "Good evening, everyone. I was in the area reviewing land management grants. Thought I'd stop by and see how the Maple Ridge Association was doing with its new paperwork." Carol opened her mouth, but nothing came out. He gestured toward the projector. "You know, it's funny. My legal staff flagged this same map for review yesterday. It looks remarkably similar to the one a judge ruled fraudulent 2 weeks ago." Whispers spread. Cameras clicked. Someone started filming. The governor continued. "Now, I don't want to assume intent, but if an association knowingly files altered boundary lines with the county recorder after being legally enjoined not to, well, that's a serious issue." He paused, eyes level with Carol's. "One that could result in criminal penalties." You could have heard a pin drop. Carol's hand trembled on the table. "Governor, this must be some mistake. We were advised—" "By whom?" he asked. She froze. "Exactly," he said. "That's what I thought." He turned to the crowd. "Folks, homeowners associations can serve a purpose, but they cannot act as private governments. They don't write law, they don't seize property, and they don't intimidate citizens. You all deserve better than that." Applause started, hesitant at first, then building until it filled the room. Carol's face went crimson. The governor leaned close to me as the room clapped. "You recording this too?" "Always," I said. He smiled. "Good man." Then he straightened, nodded to the press, and walked out. No fanfare, no security fuss. Just a quiet exit, leaving a trail of stunned silence behind him. I didn't say another word. I gathered my binder, walked to the door, and paused. "You could have just left me alone, Carol," I said quietly. "Now you've got state oversight for the next 5 years." Her only answer was the sound of her chair scraping the floor as she sat down, shaking. 2 months later, the Maple Ridge HOA was dissolved by court order. The board was barred from reforming under any new name without state approval. Carol was fined for falsified filings and banned from holding any homeowner leadership position for 10 years. The pasture remained mine, untouched, unchallenged, and now officially outside any association boundary. But the fallout didn't stop there. Turns out, once the state audit started, they found misused dues funds, tens of thousands in administrative expenses that led straight to Carol's signature. She didn't go to jail, but she paid dearly, both financially and publicly. As for me, I rebuilt the north fence with new cedar posts and added a fresh coat of red paint to the old barn. On the gate, I hung a small sign that said simply, "Private property. Respect boundaries." No anger, no gloating, just truth. One evening, a neighbor stopped by, a young couple who'd quietly watched the whole mess unfold. They brought a pie, nervous smiles, and a simple thank you. "You stood up for all of us," the husband said. "We were too scared." I shrugged. All it took was paperwork and patience. "Yeah," he said, "and a governor." I smiled. That helped too. Weeks later, I stood at the gate again, same spot where it all began. The gravel road was quiet now, the only sound the windigger. Ain't the fence and a hawk circling high above the pasture. Sometimes justice doesn't come loud or fast. Sometimes it just shows up, calmly, wearing a state pin and a polite smile. And when it does, all you have to do is have your evidence ready. So here's what I tell anyone dealing with HOA harassment. Don't yell, don't threaten. Document, record, archive. Every word, every action, every timestamp. Facts are stronger than fury, and they last longer too. That's how you win. If you've ever stood up to an HOA, a neighbor, or anyone who tried to cross your line, drop your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it. And if you liked how this one ended, subscribe. Because in this neighborhood, the next Karen always thinks she's untouchable, until the law knocks on her door.